Happy Friday, everybody. Another week of Bioactive Live Q&A coming to you with Brian from Rubber Ducky Isopods and Kevin from OK Calyx. It's been a busy week for everybody in different fashions, and one of those people that's been sharing that journey and that struggle and the fun, of course, is Kevin over there. If you guys have followed him on Instagram, you've seen all the progress that he's made in his backyards even since last week. And if you don't follow him, I would highly recommend following him because he just seriously just talks right off the sleeve, gives you some of the best information that you can get, and he doesn't really edit these videos, so it's kind of just gold. But I'll pass it over to Kevin. Just kind of let's get an update from you, brother.
Yeah.
How's everything going in Oklahoma?
Well, today has been nice and warm. It was getting probably 78, 80, something like that. And here's how I know how it's about 80 degrees is because I've always got these 5-gallon buckets out there with water. And if the days are cold, the water's cold, nothing will happen. But I have potatoes down in there always. And when the water gets hot, the JMS bubbles will start to make. And once the JMS starts to make, it's about 80 degrees. The water in the buckets are warm enough for the microbes to start working. And so I've got lots of buckets of JMS going with just some old potatoes, man. And this year I've got a stump in my garden that's the last big stump that I'm waiting to break down. But I've built my garden around three big stumps. And this one is kind of flat, and I've got all my old potatoes out there that I find in the dumpster we don't use, and I'm just smashing it with my foot because they're just getting kind of ripe and juicy and kind of weak feeling. And smashing them with my foot, grab them, throw them in the buckets, just let them sit there, and then I'll throw fresh green grass that I'm pulling around my garden, and I'll pull up like acorn roots or pecans that have started to root, and they've got a little bitty baby tree on them with big long roots. Throw them in the JMS. All that'll just start to bubble up. It just does it naturally. There's plenty of microbes on the roots. The potatoes give enough food, and I don't get a big old head on there. You could. It's easy to get a big head on there. I'm just trying to do it real easily and lazily, just throwing stuff in there, let the temperatures do the work. When the temperatures are working, then I'm dumping it and letting it go. If it cools off, I'm not doing anything. But I have planted a whole lot of stuff. I've got potatoes coming up. My onions look great. Planted about 25 pepper plants. Those are like green bell, red bell pepper plants. Some zucchinis. I planted 19 tomato plants. I planted a lot of flowers also in there. I planted sorghum, planted beets, planted borge. I planted amaranth. I've got corn. I've got lots of stuff ready, but I'm always giving it a little bit of compost. My compost is awesome, y'all. There's so many red wigglers in there. One thing I never showed was about 2 weeks ago. Every time I messed with my compost, those red wigglers are mating, and they wrap around each other, and it just looks weird. You'll see one, you'll be like, "What is going on?" But they're mating, and the temperatures were at about 72 degrees, which is perfect for them in my environment, and they're just going nuts. And I grabbed the compost today in the video and kind of break up a ball, and they're probably 25 little red wigglers just going at it, and I'm putting that all in my garden spots. I'm putting that where I plant my plants. I'm not just exposing the compost. I am strategically placing that good compost where the plants are going to benefit from it the most, which will be right there in the root zone, the root area, the rhizosphere. And I'm using lots of right now. I'm using lots of juices, lots of waters. I'm grabbing all of the extra plants and grasses that are growing, crabgrass, and I'm pulling up all this stuff and putting it in my buckets. And so the nutrients it sits there for a couple of weeks, so it starts to get a little stink to it. So it's starting to break down somewhat. But I'm just using that water to dump right back into the garden. And the green material that's in there, it goes on the top of the beds, it lays there and breaks down. So constantly just reusing it. But yeah, man, it's high time to be gardening right now for sure.
Yeah, and on the flip here in Michigan, and some people talking in the comments, sounds like Appalachia. They've had 4 to 5 inches last night and haven't seen the sun since Monday. I mean, that's unfortunately par for the course for us here in Michigan this time of year. And when it seems like when it is sunny and it's a nice high pressure system, it's cold, so it's windy, and it's just like a tough balance to find. But that is breaking, and things are blooming here, so there's definitely hope. But my
Hey, another
garden,
thing.
yeah, sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead.
No,
Talk about
no,
it.
no.
One more
Oh, just
thing, then.
yeah, yeah.
I've got a bunch of my fem plants that I pulled seeds off of with OK Calyx Genetics. All the fem work that Kid Mac and I did as a collab. All these fem seeds are coming. And what I wanted to say was tonight I got to remind that I'm gonna, if somebody's got one, like let's say the best question, I'm gonna send you a pack of Cherryana Grande across the chest of the cheetah F1 Fems untested, just pulled them off the plant this what today or yesterday. And the next, I don't even have a name for it, y'all. And then the next one is blueberry truffle across the chest of the cheetah F1 Fems. You're gonna get, there's 5 of them in there. And so these are untested Fems, but these are the ones that me, Kid Mac, Fat Big Pothead, Scissortail Sawbones, Ganja Farmer, our guys down here, we're growing these out right now this summer. They're already wet. I already pulled some of these seeds off weeks ago that were done already. Hunted them out, found them, we're cracking them already. So I'll be growing some of these in my garden this summer too. Okay, Mark, thank you, man. Sorry about that.
Yep, and just so that we're clear, that's awesome, dude, and I can't wait to that's I want to get some giveaways going again too. I just been so busy with just things going on in life, just haven't had the creative capacity to get that going again. But yeah, best question tonight gets a pack of fem seeds from Kev, and anything he's got over there is going to be fire. So please dump your questions on us. We love it. So anyways, yeah, here the contrast to here is that I have a bunch of seeds go and start right now. A lot of I have bok choy. Uh, I have Brussels sprouts, red and green peppers. I even started some romaine inside just because I could put the plastic on my greenhouse outside. I just don't have. I'm not going to be growing enough vegetables to substantiate that right now, and it's been so freaking windy here that it's just a liability. So so yeah, a lot of stuff going on indoors, just rearing it, chomping at the bit. There's definitely you know, bioactivity in the soil outside. If you go outside right now here in Michigan, you can throw a stick in the ground if you find a nice broken down pile of leaves in the corner of your yard. You know, you got to go somewhere where there is some sort of organic matter, because when you build these gardens like Kevin does and like we talked about last week, you're building that home for these worms to come to. So it's not going to be the same if you go to the middle of your grassy yard and stick a stick in the ground and start wiggling it. If you go do that though in your pile, in your nice pile of leaves that's been breaking down, you'll see worms just shoot out of those piles, like all from like 2 foot around. It's incredible to watch. And I posted a video on Instagram about it last year. And it's really simple, but it's just another kind of added benefit to building some organic matter in the backyard, even if it's just a compost pile. To have a place for those worms to come and just bang and do crazy work on the compost to break it down into good soil. It's just something that's takes time, and there's no better time to start than right now on that. So still working outside in the yard and doing stuff to get ready, but not planting, not yet anyways. So one of the things that we wanted to go through on this episode is challenges and things that you should probably consider going into your outdoor grows, and stuff that we didn't necessarily talk about last week. If you're looking to get information on like building a garden, getting a no-till going, last week's episode is a really good one, episode 9. This week we wanted to talk about some stuff from experience, and I think one of the probably one of the kind of ties into what we were just talking about. And I totally lost my train of thought. But I guess we can start with Kev. Why don't you go through some of the challenges that you deal with out there in Oklahoma? And I'm sure there's some parallels that we have here in Michigan and what I have going on.
So it's summertime, or well, it's summertime. It's not summertime yet, but it sure does feel like it. And I'm just kind of saying it's summertime because it's hot outside. If the JMS is bubbling, it's summertime because those temps are warm, and it's that time in Oklahoma. I'm planning. I'm betting there's no more freezes because I have laid it all on the line, and I've got too much to cover up, so I'll lose quite a bit. But I've got tons of seeds still. I popped almost everything I popped from seeds. The cucumbers need good warm soil, and I just didn't have a spot to keep those. And I think my seeds might have just kind of sogged out in there, and I didn't have any good cucumbers pop. Had a few, but I bought some cucumbers today. Um, Here's the number one issue. Let's talk about cannabis first, because this is a specific thing that other plants don't go through. Your cannabis plants are going to have some issues according to the amount of darkness that you have. Remember, your cannabis plants could be in 24 hours light for a long time. And I've seen them just veg in 24 hours for a few weeks because people go on vacation. They just leave the lights on the whole time, something like that. I've seen it happen. I've seen it, you can do it. It's probably not the best thing for the plant, but once they go into darkness, then things start to change. They switch into flower. And what can happen is you put your plants out on a day like this, like say for a week now, it's been nice and sunny. It's been about 75, 85 degrees. Flowers are blooming, trees are blooming, people are sneezing, there's pollen in the air and all kinds of stuff. And you're like, it's time to put plants out. And most people feel like you can put your cannabis plants out right now too. Now you can do it, but there is a prerequisite to that. But let's say when you put your cannabis plants out, what you got to know is the daylight is not enough right now for your plants to stay in veg. You're going to have more darkness than light. And you might be like, well, yeah, but sunrise comes up at 6:30 now and sun sets at 7:30, something like that. That's fine. There's not enough photons hitting that plant yet for hours in the morning and an hour in the evening time. And so take off 2 hours of that. And let's add to that. Let's say you're down in a valley like I am. That sunrise doesn't come up for another 45 minutes, and to the plant, that's a long time. And that's going to happen on the other side of my house in the evening time. Now let's add to that. Let's say you got big trees like I do in your backyard, and your plants are just going to be in shade quite a bit. That's going to be a problem because here's another issue. Let's say it's a dark, cloudy day. Your plants are not getting enough photons to keep in the veg cycle, and there's a lot of science that is out there understanding the cells that do all this work and all the change to trigger the cannabis plant to go into flower. But it's the amount of photons that the plant receives that it'll keep it in veg. And when it doesn't get enough, it's like, well, it's getting those fall seasons. We better start doing what we do because our end is coming, because it is going to die after it does its flowering. Evolutionarily speaking, it's got an end, and it's thinking, oh, it's coming. So there's lots of factors to think about when you put your plan out that I did not think about the first year. In 2018, it was late March, and I'm like, oh yeah, man, it's so nice. I'm gonna put these cannabis plants outside, and it's gonna rock and roll. And I just set them in my backyard. They got big and pretty and big, and then all of a sudden they stunted out, and then they just got weird. Those single leaves popped up, and it was going through the whole re-veg thing, which I had no idea what that was. Two summers later of me figuring out what's actually going on, it was just that I'm down in a valley. There's not enough light, and my plants will go early into flower. Now, here's the thing: if you look at last year, you'll see I have these floodlights outside. It's supplemental lighting because my plants will literally go into flower in mid to late June. And it's like, good grief, they won't grow at all. And I mean that, like, if there's a day that's cloudy and it's not enough photons and it comes all back to the night, and then the next day is a little cloudy for just a few hours, but then the sun comes up, they're done. They're already triggered into flower. And so it's just a big old mess. And so the supplemental lighting is out there so that I can go into August. And usually August 1st is when I'm like, okay, I'm going to let them go and we'll see what happens. And that's typically when I just start counting week one. And so it's all of August, all of September, and then October 1st is basically Croptober, and it's time to chop. So That's the number one issue. One thing that you can look at is your phone. If you look at the weather app and then scroll down, you'll see sunrise, sunset, and you'll see your time, your darkness to light, and it's just like having your light for an indoor grow. You can only have, you have to have your certain amount of hours of light, certain amount of hours of darkness, and that sunrise sunset's kind of telling you, depending on where you're at on a certain land, land service, not down in the valley like me, but kind of up a little bit. Yeah, it kind of tells you how much light you're having, how much darkness you're having. That's one big issue that people always will have. Like, why am I no idea what's going on? So, how
Yeah,
about you,
that's a
Mark?
great that's exactly the point that I was going to make. And it's crazy here, and it can even, it doesn't have to be a valley. It can be trees, it can be just
Can you
positioning in
ask
your yard.
maybe to hop
You're
off his game real quick? 'Cause
it could be your house, it could be trees, it could be little humps in the ground that are just blocking an extra hour or two of sunlight in the morning or the afternoon, that can change that.
man,
And it's something that has to be acquired and just learned kind of with your situational, with your spot. But it's something that you should really consider when we've talked about this before, especially with like permaculture, the importance of planning. Um, this is something that relates to everybody. Planning for your sunlight and thinking about it and looking at it before you put your garden in, so that you can get the optimal sunlight. Because, like Kevin said, he'll be back here in a second, but like he said, he goes into flower early in August, and it's kind of the same thing for me. If I don't wait till July 1st to plant, I go into a re-veg cycle because I have literally one big tree that overhangs my garden and blocks some sunlight. So, and then late in the season, I go into a fast, quick flower. I start going into that transition period early, understanding that is important for me, because one of the other challenges you can run into is A, security, and B, laws. So in some jurisdictions, it might be legal to grow marijuana, but it might not be legal for it to be visible. So when you start running into late summer, and you're hitting that transition where it's growing 3-4 inches a day vertically, all of a sudden you're going to have to start pulling this thing back because it's going to turn into 10 feet real quick. And you and what KCMO said, what are laws? Yeah, but it's like, if you're like me, I'm on a corner lot in a suburban area. So I can't have it over 6 feet for A, the law, but B, because I don't want people to see it. It's a security thing as well. It's like out of sight, out of mind. Um, so if you're blessed to have a spot like Kevin where you're kind of set back away, you got a nice big expanse, it's awesome. But one consideration with that sunlight is also, you know, how tall they're going to get, when you should plant them, based on how tall they're going to actually get. Because I might be able to get away with like a mid-June plant, but come early August when they're going full transition on me, they're going to be 7-8 feet tall. They've had too long to veg in my garden, because I've only got a 6 foot fence, and by law I can't go over that, and I have kids, and it's okay for me to do this by the book. So that's one thing to consider as well. Kevin, welcome back, buddy.
thank you, man. Just got dropped. Sorry, guys. So, sounded like I was understanding the whole light issue of taking it all outside. I'm sure, like, yeah, you're depending on where you're at, even in the states, like you up in Michigan, you're gonna have shorter days quicker than we are, just because of probably weather also starts to come in.
Yeah, well, and like I mean, and like I said, if I plant too early, I might be able to get away with it with the sunlight, but I'm running into issues with a 10 foot, 15 foot tall tree. So if you don't think you can grow 10 to 15 foot tall trees here in Michigan, it's only a Northern Cal or Central Valley thing. That's not true. We have a short season, but we grow huge plants.
You can start a seed plant on June 1st, and it will get huge. And we've done it many times in my no tills over there. along the fence. So there is no rush. They will get big, and the only problem with rushing it is having to go through re-veg, and that's just awful. I just cannot handle it anymore. I usually just like gotta go.
And it delays you too, when things get good, right? Like you're going through re-veg when it should be just blasting off.
Yeah,
Super frustrating.
yeah, very. It just stalls out on you.
Real quick to add to that, here in Colorado, like this weekend, it's probably going to be 72, 76. I saw in the truck today there was like 80 something, right? And then on Tuesday, it's supposed to snow again. And so when you guys are talking about this kind of stuff, for most people, depending on where you are living, it's actually around Mother's Day, where you have like the less risk when you're planting these things outdoors. And you really need to understand where you are living, your environment to dial these things in. That's why when Kevin was saying about the lighting aspects, I don't think enough people think about that at the beginning. So that's why I was feeling like that was definitely gold bars coming off. If you've been doing this for a while, then yeah, you understand a lot of the things that we're mentioning. But it's nice to hear these basics again, kind of build these building blocks. And again, if you're able to take your plants out, you get them nice and healthy, and then before Mother's Day, another snowfall comes. Usually those plants have snapped and broke. It's just not be being a little too greedy, I think, with time. Like in testing Mother Nature, sometimes is gonna bite you.
Yeah, the that's like it's kind of like the JMS test. Put the JMS out. Put the potatoes in the water, add some leaf mold, and if it starts to bubble, it's kind of like Mother Nature saying, "All right, it's time to let's start doing something. At least dump it on the soil, get that going." But you're getting in Oklahoma, you're getting close when we're having consistent. And the thing is this: you can have one 85-degree day and it's not enough. The next day is down to 74, 76 maybe. It won't heat the water up enough. It won't you so it's just telling you I don't need to put plants in either. I just need to wait. Because really the best idea is basically this is how I do it, y'all. And it's not like I do it every year, but it's kind of like here's what wisdom has brought me to. Put 5-gallon buckets out, fill them up with water, put some potatoes in them. Potatoes are super duper cheap and they usually have some left over, at least in my house we do. But just stick them outside and let them get all just sit there and rot, and they can bud out, whatever. But they're gonna be able to you'll be able to smash them. You just need to get some juice out, put them in the water, a little bit of leaf mold, like the regular old JMS. And when temperatures are warm enough, long enough, that JMS will fire off. You'll start seeing those JMS bubbles. That's when you're like, okay, let's work the soil and work the soil with JMS for about 2 weeks, and it's like you're getting pretty good. Now it's time to probably start planting. It's not a guarantee of no frost coming and a late frost coming, but if you can get 2 weeks of JMS dumping in your soil, then it's time to start putting those plants in. It's a Mother Nature way of kind of telling you, all right, it's time to start. But that's typically what I like to try to do.
Um, Another issue that you can have, kind of just moving on to a different challenge, and I don't know what your area is like. Here in Michigan, it's a little more lax because marijuana's been legal and it's so readily available for so cheap. It's been completely devalued. But from a security standpoint, there are things that you can do and things that you can consider in placing your plants. One thing I learned living in kind of San Bernardino, Southern California, you know, 12 years ago when I first, built my first no-till bed outdoors and took a stab at it in the desert. There was a lot of eyes, and it was not the case where it was completely devalued. So security was at the forefront of my concern. And one thing that I did, and one thing that somebody told me early on that was important, was growing a lot of buffer stuff, even if it's just gigantic tomato plants, just something green in the areas where people could possibly see. Trellis something up. Somebody posted on Instagram, arborvitae are the best for unwanted eyes. That's a super cheap, but they're not the most beautiful thing in the world. But if you're not looking to, if you only have a 6 foot fence and you're bound by that, then arborvitaes will grow. They'll grow fast and they'll grow tall. So you can have a hedgerow of 14-foot arborvitaes in probably 5 to 10 years. So if you think about these things ahead of time, think about it now. Maybe these first few years you got to tie those plants back, keep them under 6 feet. But once you have that hedgerow going, Or if you just position that garden to a spot where you're already behind a hedgerow, even if you lose a little bit of sunlight, you have to weigh those options. It was really important for me in California for that, to have a successful grow without getting robbed, honestly, because it was so socially, culturally diverse there. There was a lot of people coming and going in my neighborhood. So that was a huge concern. That could be concerns for other people. So just think about those things.
Uh, one of the one of the easiest ways to get caught usually is from a buddy of yours that you're hanging out with, his girlfriend, and it works other ways too. Like if you have a girl that's a friend of yours, her boyfriend. Usually that's where you can get caught, especially getting caught up in this kind of stuff at the beginning. And then real quick too, a lot of people get busted because if they're doing it bigger with housings, and you know they have a variety of different houses, if you're not taking the trash out, mowing the lawn, doing all the things that you need to do, that's the another like easiest way that a lot of people get busted doing this stuff. So think about these things and think them through. Like if I was truly living at a spot, how would things operate? Well, I would put the trash out every time. I would know when recycling day is to make sure everything's matching up with the residents around me. I think those little things go a long way. And for a lot of you guys that want to get into this kind of stuff that still have that cowboy aspect to it, these are the things that are going to allow you to be not only successful perpetually, but also thinking long term. I've always seen people that find the most success never tell anybody what they do.
Lisa McCarville said everything depends on your location and biome. Here in the desert, our outdoor grow timelines are different. Totally the case. That's why it's nice. I mean, you're in Oklahoma, Kevin. You're in Denver. I'm in New York, so we do have a little bit of diversity. I did grow out in Southern California, which I would definitely call the desert. San Bernardino is super sand, super intense sun. And one thing you have to consider out there is it's almost like the sun's too intense. It's too hot. So you're burning off volatile terpenes and stuff like that. So now you got to consider things like sunshades and getting air flowing and cover for different reasons than we might consider out here or in Oklahoma for storms and stuff. And I think that's a good segue, Kev. Like you guys get some pretty intense storms out there. Do you really worry about them as you're going through your veg cycle, or are you just letting these plants get battle tested for when you jump into to flower?
So no, I'm trying to keep their structure as best I can. Whatever that plant's bringing up, and typically when it's summertime, I don't top a plant. I just let them go. I just want to get them. I just want to see what they look like with no anything. But I will I will use poles, T posts, use my fence. I'll use each plant, tie each plant together, and like often I'll have 5 or 6 plants in about a 8 to 10 foot little space, and I'll have them all bound together so that they all move as one, and they'll just kind of sway together instead of one getting hammered, that weak one, but it gets held up a bit. And then I'll tie that whole thing to the fence posts that are cemented down in the ground. It'll be something like that. I don't know what I'll do, but what I'm trying to do is make sure that they're not getting bothered as much as possible before we go to flower, because the idea is to have big, pretty, healthy plants that aren't kind of broken in half and need to heal a little bit, and they send a lot of their growth hormone to that spot, and they just kind of hang out and don't do much until they feel healthy again. But that's the idea. If you got a healthy plant going right into flower, that's the best thing. It's gonna be so much better than a plant that, here's the problem. When a storm comes along, it's going to be typically not the whole plant break over, which I've had that happen before, but it's typically going to be a a plant smashed up against another one and broke some stems off. Probably some good big fat stems, because the storms typically come around September. So it's kind of getting warm. It's muggy, and the weather's changing, and the storms are coming. And so you've got like maybe week 4, week 3 on a flowered plant, and you're snapping big branches off. And then what I've had happen after that or before, like I've had that happen in veg, and I've taped it back up or wired it back up. And I've actually had a plant die. I have no idea why, but it was because that connection, bugs and junk and whatever had got in there and just started eating dead parts of the plant and worked their way up that vein. And they killed the top of the from the break all the way up. Everything went dead, and that's when I was like, that's amazing that it really will affect it that big. Because I did lose like a week 7 plant in a week 7 in flower plant. It's like, man, and it was huge. It was an outside plant. So yeah, I try to tape them up. I try to hold them up as best as possible. I do a lot of work trying to keep them up because storms break your whole plant. It's over, and they've been You've probably been growing them since January. A lot of us have just growing them, kind of getting them big, getting them ready for outside. And man, that is 6, 7 months of work already snapped over in one day, and that makes you feel sad.
Another good example of, because you guys out there, you get you could potentially get tornadoes. So you get some ridiculous winds at times throughout your summer season, and I don't know the exact tornado season, but there's one consideration, one concern, but also the torrents of rain that you guys will just get in a clip, right? It'll just run through, wash you guys out. It'll be dry, so it want to blow probably your landscape apart. Nothing's ready to receive the water except for your garden, of course, because you've been building it with all these amazing microbes that are going to keep it porous and ready to receive, and it's going to be moist and ready to roll. Um, Another great example, because we don't really necessarily like, I'm not concerned through veg so much. I don't really get crazy tornadoes and heavy gale force winds and stuff like that. I've got not much concern. I've also got fencing around my entire backyard, and it's not as big as yours as Kevin, so it doesn't create like a tunnel. It creates more of like a blockade. So I have that in my benefit. But out here, as far as weather goes, things can turn on you. It can just turn into torrential rain for weeks at a time out here. It can turn to extreme heat. But luckily, when you build a good soil, like I was saying, and you build a good, nice garden that has consideration for managing that water, um, it doesn't necessarily hurt anything, and I just let my plants here generally ride it out. That is until I get to flower. And I wanted to ask you, Kev, because once I get to flower, I'm putting a greenhouse on, and this year I'm not going to be doing that because I was dealing with some issues with stagnant air and just not what I'm looking for. So this year I feel like I have to do a cover because there will be times I'm gone for a week, and I can't really run out there and throw a tarp over the top of it at the drop of a hat. So what do you
And that's
do?
because you'll be in flower, right? That's because you'll be in flower and you don't want them soaked.
I don't want them soaked. Also, those buds are going to be like sponges, so they're going to soak in that water and put so much weight and stress on all those branches. And luckily, through veg, you've built a strong plant that can hopefully resist that. There are people that just say "fuck it" here and just literally no cover. But anyways, Kev, what do you do during flower? Because that was veg, and you have to worry about that even in veg. But flower time, it's a little more even delicate. Um,
Yeah, so when it's flower time here in Oklahoma, it's in September, late August, September, and the temperatures could be 100 degrees and the humidity be 100 degrees and or 100, yeah, 100% humidity, and it'll just rot your buds. You can't keep them dry, so naturally they will not stay dry. They'll simply rot. And if they're a fat bud or a leafy bud, it doesn't matter. The moisture is inside, and the leaves are touching each other and they're wet. And if you put a piece of lettuce in a little bit of water and then just put it in the refrigerator, you'll see it just go and just mush because that water just simply breaks those cell walls down quick. And that's what's happening with that leafy material on the cannabis. And it just starts to break down, and then it attracts the bacteria. Then it attracts the webby molds, and on the outside it's going to look probably fine typically, but then it's like when you crack open and you look down in there and you see all that mold along the stem because all that stuff has died. That's the issue, and a lot of it's botrytis, and it just rots the plant, it rots the flower quick. So what I always have out in my when it's flower time and I probably week 3, I will have fans going 24/7 outside. Doesn't matter when it is, what's going on, even if it's raining, those fans are out there going. Because I'll spend like $35 on a cheap fan that will oscillate for the growing season so that I can literally get me $20,000 worth of hash rosin. Man, that's the facts, man. That's it. There's no question that I can get that much hash rosin. You know, if you were to buy a gram of good hash rosin, it's going to cost you anywhere from, if it's a deal, maybe 35, $40, but typically it's around $60 here, 50 to $60 in Oklahoma. And I had jars of it last summer, and so this year I've been telling Scissor Tail Solventless, these guys always wash my stuff. I was like, man, I'm growing for rosin this year, so I'm gonna keep those fans out there because I gotta have those buds alive. I gotta have them not rotten up on the inside. I gotta have them dry. That's the main thing. It's gotta have it dry, and an oscillating fan will really help. And even if you just got one, just get it to where it's gonna push some air across it. Man, it's gonna help a ton. Now, I have also been like in week 7, week 8, and had almost 100% humidity, and it rains for like 3 days or 4 days. I will go out there every morning and evening with my big air pack leaf blower and just blowing them, man, because you got no other choice. I promise you. All that work that's been going on for 8 to 9 months now, in week 7 and 8 of flower here, all that work could be totally gone because they just stayed too wet one day, and then whoosh, they just start getting eaten up with all the mold and the junk on the inside of that flower. So fans constantly. So again, spend $30, $40 on an oscillating fan so that you can have all that bud that you do not have to go buy, and you can have it as your medicine that you don't have to spend any money on. That's my goal, is that right there. So,
Kev, during like a rainstorm, you're just going and unplugging it basically and just let it get slammed with rain, more or less, or do you go grab it, pull it inside, or what are you doing with that thing? You have probably more than just one fan, right? Because you've got multiple gardens. Is that right? No, we lost him again. Um, you still, yeah, you're still there, Brian. Having some technical issues tonight, but yeah, so same thing here because some seasons are fantastic where we have a nice warm but not too humid, and then it doesn't get too cold at night during the late season. But last year was a prolific season for issues with powdery mildew, and other fungal issues on outdoor bud around here because it was just so damn hot and humid, and then it would get really cold at night. So there was that there was like a dew point going on that was just soaking the plants daily. So even here, I would highly recommend, especially when you get, I mean, critical when you get into flower. It's not really that important in veg at all. When you get into flower and you start seeing those buds, definitely get air movement, and the more air movement you can possibly get on it, the better.
Yeah, there's
I have, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say there's a brand of oscillating fans called Air King. I've purchased those over the years, and I think they are well worth the money. They're kind of like a Toyota or a Honda of that world. And then we always take the front of the oscillating fan off to constantly make sure that we are cleaning that fan. So that's a lot of stuff, indoors or outdoors. There's something too, I think, just keeping your equipment as clean as you can, and I don't know. I challenge you to go to your friend's grows and take a moment and actually look at the fans and see what they're actually blowing around the room. It's quite interesting once you start to look at that kind of stuff.
So the one thing with outdoor and hash that's really important too is keeping them very protected, like Kevin said, from moisture, but also keeping them well protected from dirt. So like keeping them trimmed up so the splashback when it does rain isn't covering your plants with shit, because when you go wash it late in the season, especially if you're not doing, and this will be another talk for another time, but if you're not doing preparation, you'll run into dirty, off-colored hash. So regardless of what you're doing, you're not going to want that in your flower either, because it's going to give it weird tastes and lower the quality of it. But that's one thing to consider as well. Um, And then the other thing to consider is like if you've got things going on that are super dirty, like if there's people, if you're if you're mowing lawns right next to your shit and stuff like that, I would plan on doing like a bud wash prior to freezing them. And Kevin, I think you would agree on that. Um, but again, talk for a different time. Uh, I had another point and I forgot, but we can move on from that. We've got several questions if you guys want to get into those, or we can keep
Yeah,
talking.
let's get into some of those questions because we
You know
got a
what?
lot we can keep talking
Here
about.
was the only other thing, because we can definitely move and have another part 3 on this as we go through the season. Like we want to talk about what's relevant for everybody. So we'll definitely be talking on this as we progress through the season more and more and more. But the other thing I wanted to say about the quality of hash and the quality of your flower, and one other thing for this discussion that can really show stop you is those caterpillars. And knowing what to do for that, and that's a simple preventative spray with some BT Kristaki. But pests are going to be another issue that you do have to consider outdoors. Definitely less than indoors, I would say personally, but there's considerations there as well. And I guess with that, we can kind of, that's like a foreshadowing for a future conversation. And let's get into some questions. Brian, you want to take it away?
Yeah, we have 10 so far. You guys can still get them in. If you're watching this on Instagram, it's easier for us, all the back and forth, and there's some timing glitches sometimes with it. So it's best to ask the questions in real time on YouTube, please. All right, the first one from Randall Flag is making the Jadam sulfur worth it? Easier alternative? I would say that's your lane there, Mr. Kev.
Okay, yeah, that's a real good question. I have thought about this very question this month. Jadam sulfur, because here's why, because I've got my hoarder packs up at okcalyxshop.com. The input hoarder pack is back up and it's on sale, and I'm putting JS in it this time. I put Jadam wetting agent in it last time, and now that they're back up, I've got some Jadam sulfur that I did not make, that a guy traded me in a big trade of inputs, and it's just inputs of mine that I have now, and I've got tons of inputs, and I like to make a bunch of them. However, Jadam sulfur is not worth making it. Jadam sulfur stinks worse than JLF. Jadam sulfur is very soapy and um, surfactanty, where it just thins out. And so when you're rubbing it on your fingers, it's like it just won't come off. It smells like eggs, and everyone can smell it on you. Oh, it's awful. So for me, no, because you also got to go through a whole cooking process. You have to have new equipment, and the Jadam that I practice is again, as we've talked about before, the Jadam that I practice is trying to imitate the poor communist farmer who cannot afford to go get anything but can rely on nature and seasons and understanding how things work to get his own soils and his own fertilizers and things like that. So that's my ultimate goal. That's what I'm trying to do. And when I have to cook something and I have to heat something up and I have to cook and stir and turn and measure, that's not the one that I do. So the short answer to that is no, it's not worth it. Buy it, barter, have something. And when somebody's like, "Hey, I made a bunch of JS or bunch of Jadam wetting agents," say, "You want to trade some inputs for a little bit of that?" Ask for like a quart of it. That's a typical thing. Half a quart, maybe. If they made a bunch, they made a bunch. They didn't just make a little bit. They made gallons of the stuff. That's what they did. They didn't make just a small batch of it. So they probably got a good amount, and I always like to ask for about a quart and go down from there because quart's is a good amount.
And ladies and gentlemen, if Kevin is saying that it smells bad, it 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 smells bad, because
Bad.
if you've smelled JLF, you know what bad smells like.
Because he was being kind. He was saying it smells like eggs, but it doesn't really smell like eggs. It smells like dirty egg farts, to be
Bad.
honest.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
gross.
Bad. Yeah.
colon smells.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's unpleasant and memorable. The
Yeah.
next
And
one from I think both of you could probably contribute to this, but from Mark Nelson, I got a lot of hash wash water and wash flour. What's the best process to make it into IMO or JMS?
Okay, so I have a better idea for you. I can answer that one too, but I have a better idea. We might progress this thought a little bit because it'll even be a better outcome, I believe. So the hash water, save your hash water and save the flour that you washed. Now, here's what you'll do. You'll take the hash water and you're going to put, usually what I do is get a 5 gallon bucket of the hash water or close to it, and I'll put about a pound, 2 pounds of rice in there, and I'll just massage the rice for a minute or so, however long, and then I'll drain all the liquid off and keep the rice, and I cook it for IMO1, but all the liquid now is considered hash rice water, right? Hash wash rice water. And so you let that sit for 2 days, 3 days in some heat. You let the bacillus bacteria start to form and develop. Keep it warm, sure does help. But then I'll have a warm whole gallon of whole milk, a warm gallon of whole milk, and I'll just I'll pour the whole thing in if there's room, or half of it, or 3/4, just enough to fill the rest of a 5 gallon bucket top up. And then I'll get it right to the pretty close to the top, and then that sits there for 2 or 3 days, and it cheeses up on the top, and below it you have hash water labs, right? You use the hash water to make labs, and so that's called your hash water labs. Now here's what you're going to do. You saved the flour. It can still be wet, sitting in a bucket, sitting in a trash bag, whatever the case may be, because it's going to take you about 5 to 7 days to make those labs. But once the labs are made and you've strained that liquid off that's in that 5 gallon bucket and left all the settlement and everything, all the cheese, you're going to pour about a pint. What I'm thinking is this: a 5 gallon bucket of flour that has been washed, right? It's still wet, it's soggy, it can be water in there, whatever. Take a pint of that hash water lab that you made, pour it in there. Take a pint of molasses, pour it in there, and then fill it all up with water, give it a good stir. And in about a month, you're going to have some awesome hash water, washed cannabis, fermented plant extract, and it's all closed loop. You used it many times to make multiple products. That is the best way to use what you're saying right there. Now, what's the best process to make it into IMO or JMS? All you'd have to do is, if you want to use JMS, you take a big handful of it, put it in a 5 gallon bucket of water, add some potatoes, make sure it's in hot water. That would be making some JMS with it. And the IMO, that's not going to be really a thing. I mean, you could set rice on it and you're going to get bacteria and molds on it eventually. But the IMO is a little bit different because it's a wet material. It's going to be all bacteria attracted to it, real fast.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I was gonna say make an FPE, a Canna specific FPE out of that trim and the water. Use it all. So if you're gonna do that, follow Kev's process. The only simpler thing that you could possibly do with that is just to top your garden with it. Um, that would be killer. I mean, there's nothing better, as Jadam would say, than the stuff that came from the plant as fertilizer. A plant specific fertilizer, especially if you're growing canna. Even if you're not, I'd still say it's just going to be a fire topper, a worm, hot spot, all that fun stuff. So I agree, Kev.
Uh, KC Mogro, I've read night crawlers are invasive. Any thoughts on this?
If you're growing outside, I don't worry about any worm that I see. I'm sure there are some species that would be considered evasive, or sorry, invasive. I was digging through my no-tills. Oh, I bought a broad fork 3 days ago, and I broad forked everything last night about 1 in the morning. Man, I'm just out there with a flashlight, just enjoying the weather, broad forking it. And so, Mark, you're talking about how worms will just start crawling out, dude. They were when I would a broad fork, guys, is just like a pitchfork that's kind of wide, and you can get down deep and under, and just kind of poop lift up a little bit. And the point is soil compaction. I'm trying to get this new soil to stay broken up a little bit, to have pieces fall down under there and kind of just get things moving around a little bit. It won't be something that's always done, but it's kind of what we talked about in no-till. It just needs, the soil compaction is too much right now. I need to break it up. But when I was breaking it up, there were so many different types of worms just crawling out of there, crawling into the walkways. And there would be a few red wigglers. I noticed those, but then there would be some of those other ones that are just lightning fast. Some of them call them jumpers, Alabama jumpers, things like that. But in nature, what are you going to do? Get all the worms out? You're not. You're going to have to learn to work with nature. And so just take that thought off your mind, because you're not going to beat that one. And if my thought is outside, if you got more worms, merrier. Bring them all on.
Agreed. And I have heard that before, and there's actually a video. It's 6 minutes long. We don't have to watch it now. About North America's destructive invasive earthworms, and I'm sure that it's tied to climate change, but I'm sure that it's also tied to the killing off and kind of pasteurization of our farmlands. Um, and so I've also heard of what was the other one? There's a jumping worm.
Well, there's
Yeah, the
Alabama jumper and Georgia
Alabama.
jumper.
Are they?
Kind of the same thing.
Yeah, but these ones, oh yeah, they're referred to as an Alabama jumper, but yeah, there's apparently those are invasive as well. So, but I would
Yeah.
agree, Kevin, in that you just have to trust nature. I haven't had issues with those worms, although it says that they're in Michigan. I haven't had any issues.
We
And
have
then,
them here. They'll,
but
they'll jump out of your hand, basically. They'll jump out of a hole in the soil. They're lightning fast.
Venetia Farm said the Asian jumpers are up in the Northeast or Nebraska. I'm not sure which one. I can't remember where you are in Venetia. Um, But here's an example though of an invasive species that it's like, oh no, they're here. But think about the Asian ladybugs. I think they're called ladybird beetles. Those are invasive. Every single ladybug that I see on my plants outdoor here in Michigan is an Asian invasive species. And it's sad and it sucks and it's tied to a lot of things and a lot of the ways that these are harvested. There's things that you can do to you know make a difference, I guess, and that would be not buying ladybugs, because in my opinion they're kind of just a kitschy bullshit money grab. And if you look into the way that they're harvested, it's really destructive. So the market is not one that promotes regeneration like we think it does. But going back to what my point was, is that these invasive ladybugs, I still want them all over my garden and plants. You know why? Because they're ferocious eaters of aphids. They're cruising my plants. They're crushing aphids all day. And if it wasn't for them, if there was no ladybugs at all, I think I might have more aphid issues, to be completely honest. So another example of just kind of embracing what we have. Unfortunately, we don't have control over the invasion of these things. So, long-winded answer to that one.
I
Apologies.
I wanted to add real quick, when it comes to the ladybugs, that part of it, the real answer to that is more like green lacewings. They seem to have, if you're gonna pay money for something, the green lacewings from the sacks are actually a decent return on investment as far as how quickly that'd be. But there's three night crawlers, right? There's African night crawler, European night crawler, and the Canadian night crawler. And so these are only really beneficial to you if you're using a huge fabric pot. We're talking 25-gallon minimum. I would even say if you're talking real like the African night crawlers in conjunction with the European night crawlers, you would say 50-gallon minimum, because the whole point of the night crawler aspect to them is that when the lights are off, they come to the top to feed. This is fantastic for a cannabis farmer because they're going up and down all the time, building these dissolved oxygen channels. The problem is that all night crawlers seem to get grouped together. Well, if you put a bunch of Canadian night crawlers into your beds, no matter the size, eventually they're all going to come out and go all over the walls of your grows and that kind of stuff, even in the early days. And so that's why I'm saying when you kind of get into a lot of this stuff, red wiggler is the way to go. And I don't think necessarily that those would ever be big enough to be invasive in any kind of like what would the word be for that, like where it would actually matter, you know?
Capacity, kind of, yeah.
Yeah. And it's a sad kind of thing, but it's usually like earthworms and stuff that you're going to find out that make it into Mother Nature. It's composting worms more like need a human hand to really allow them to thrive at any kind of level. They eat so much that you would have to constantly be feeding them, or they would need to be with so many trees over them that there's a constant food source. So think about these kind of things. I've seen many people who kind of dismiss vermicomposting because they started off using a Canadian nightcrawler from the bait shop, and they didn't heed these warnings where that's not the worm that you want to start out with. It's the red wiggler.
I've even heard, and I don't know that there's any validity, but I would believe that it makes sense because when you even buy a red wiggler from the bait shop, they're bigger and they're slower. They don't wiggle like a red wiggler does, like a composting red wiggler. They're not small, like a composting red wiggler is. So
Yeah.
I don't believe that they might be the same species, but it's a species that's been bred to be slow and big and perfect for fishing,
Yeah.
um, and
The
not composting.
if you use one of my red wigglers to go fishing, you couldn't fit the hook in it. You'd have to just get it right to be able to fit the hook all the way through it because they are not big at all. And they don't go taking off either. Like sometimes they'll lay there and you can touch them, and they won't do anything. And sometimes they'll wiggle and move off. But those bigger worms, if you kind of mess with them, you'll see them their tail hanging out of a hole. You touch that tail and boom, boom, they come down. But that red wiggler's are always going this way, and they're always having things, laying on top. They're moving and wiggling. But if something touches it, that might just lay there, might not do anything. They just lay there and eat and poop. They go horizontal. That's why they're that good composting worm, like Brian was talking about. You in a soil outside, you want the worms going up and down for exactly what Brian was saying, and then you also want these worms going back and forth that are eating and pooping that vermicompost as they're eating organic matter that continues to fall down onto the soil. So um, the red wiggler is for compost. If you're starting compost, just get a bag of red wigglers because that's what I did. I got one bag of red wigglers from Jim's Red Wiggler Farm, and one bag, and I have red wigglers everywhere, just everywhere, and just they multiply like crazy when the conditions are right.
And if you can find someone local, I don't know where Venezia Farms is. If you want to post it in the comments, we can throw it up here. Support local. My buddy Chris here in Michigan sells worms. It's not the greatest business because it's a tough one. It's tough to extract worms from your bins in high quantities, and I don't even know exactly how Uncle Jim's does it, but um, so you're not necessarily going to get like a bag of 10,000 red wigglers like you would from Uncle Jim's from like Chris, but you can still get a good starting population of 500 to 1,000 for your no-till indoor beds or just to get shit going outside, like Kevin said. Um, all right, question following up. Oh yeah, let's go into this one. Kev, this one's probably for you. I think we're gonna agree on the answer, but you can say it
Yeah,
way more eloquently.
yeah. So it's already made a little bit of a JMS in there for you, all that juice and stuff. And right now you can consider that just a weak uh, potato JLF, all that juice that's in there. But those potatoes are perfect. The reason you boil a potato in the traditional JMS making way is to soften the potato up so that all of it gets spread out into the liquid, and so there's lots of surface area and microbiology make contact with all of the food that they want to eat, and they don't have to work their way into a harder, chunky potato. However, I have found many other ways and methods that work just fine, and you don't have to go through that traditional cooking thing. Um, like I said earlier, one of the best things I've been doing this year is just smashing these old rotten potatoes, like you're talking about, Tyler Howard, smashing them under my foot, getting them maybe a couple smashes, stomp, 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 and get a little juice going, and then throwing them into the 5 gallon buckets and just constantly make JMS. For real, constantly make it all throughout the summer. If you got a bunch of potatoes, just keep pulling them out. Like put maybe, I'm assuming they're about as big as your fist or smaller, right? Those kind of potatoes. Stomp about two or three of them in a 5 gallon bucket of water. Add some leaf mold, some green grass, some compost, some JLF, whatever, and it'll start to bubble and inoculate, and you're making a JMS. and use them that way. But the other way would just be put them in a compost, let them rot down, or put them in a JLF as a nutrient, eventual nutrient. But the best thing for you if you're going outside is making JMS.
Quick follow up for Venezia Farms. He's out of Brimfield, Mass. Go to Ozark Worms. Look him up on Google, ozarkworms.com. This one's for you. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
This one's from Instagram. Shout out to JB2024JG. When you are straining JSM, what micron filter do you use, and do you reuse the captured mass?
So when I make JMS, y'all, okay, there's a couple things you can do, but when I make JMS, I don't filter anything at all. I'm just dumping the juice and trying to keep the green matter and potatoes in the bucket if I want to, but typically I am because I actually reuse it. I'll dump that green matter and potatoes back into another bucket and start getting it going. Keep dumping it again, then another bucket into the same one, and just keep building up buckets of JMS. But I don't filter it because I'm just dumping it down onto soil. However, you can foliar with JMS. You would foliar 30. You would foliar 1 teaspoon, not tablespoon, 1 to 4 teaspoons into 32 ounces, just a regular spray bottle. And if it's an established plant, not a seedling or a small plant, but if it's established and it can be moved in and out and all that stuff, I would go 4 teaspoons of JMS into 32 ounces of water. And again, really, man, there's no need to strain it because once if you just take from the very top of your JMS, it's going to be a whole lot of liquid there, and more likely you're not going to get a lot of material in there. You can get a good little shot of juice doing it that way. Let's say you cooked your potatoes and there's just no way that you can't get some potatoes. Well, then use if you press cannabis or anything like that, a 75 micron is going to be super easy. That'd be totally fine. It'll let liquid go through. It'll hold the rest of your stuff out. I'm thinking just a 75 micron bag, and you get a cup of water and you pour it through there. That's how I would be doing it. But otherwise, I don't strain it. That's one step, and that's unnecessary.
Is JSM something different than JMS? Is that sulfur? Jadam sulfur? No, he would think that was just a typo.
I think it'd be a typo, yeah.
Okay, right on.
Yep.
All right.
Next one is from Venetian Farms. Any luck with a specific brand of Bacillus bacteria to help blast fungus gnat explosion? Mark, your beneficials have been killing it, but left had an explosion due to tons of wet shrooms. Sorry.
So in my experience, BTI doesn't work that effectively. Having said that, that was more of on like a longevity period, like scale, right? Like I guess at first, if I think back years ago when I first used BTI, I think I was using Microbe Lift BMC is a liquid product of it. That's what a lot of people use. You can also use mosquito bits and just soak them real quick into a liquid. You can also top with it, which to me doesn't work effective at all for what you're thinking. It's also GMO corn cob bits that they use as the carrier of that. So you have to be aware of that as well. If you're gonna dump those into your pots, yes, they'll get eaten up, but they are not, the greatest shit. But anyways, there's also another product called Aquabac, which is a full organic BTI product. And again, I've used all these products. Microbe Lift worked the best. The only issue is that you need to apply it with water. So if you're running a little moist, which is what's going to be the root issue, especially if it's in like worm bins. Um, if you're running into excessive moisture and the bin's just a little bit too moist, and maybe it's just great for the worms, but it's just maybe a little too moist for the time of year because we're just going through a transition where it's getting warmer outside, things are coming back to life. they might have just bloomed for a second, and the biodiversity needs to correct itself and kind of it'll grow again based on how much food it has, right? So if there's a shit ton of food in there, they'll bloom and kind of grow to take care of that problem, but it does take time. So I would say that would be my recommendation is just let it dry out a little bit, maybe pull those shrooms off, or better yet, bury them down in the bin, get them covered with some really good bioactive soil. That should really help you out. And if you're going to use a BTI product, you might have luck with Microbe Lift BMC. I don't sell any BTI or anything like that anymore just because it doesn't work, and I don't want people to be confused that that's what's working against the fungus gnats. I want people to understand that it really is the biodiversity that works.
This next question would be more for you, from Tyler Howard again. How do you guys store collected rainwater?
Well, right now it's just 5 gallon buckets. That's all I store mine in. I don't have, thankfully, I don't have a need to have a bunch of rainwater to be stored. But when it does rain, you can set like you can make things. If you make if you have like a 5 gallon bucket and you use like a plastic trash lid that goes way out past it, put a hole right in the middle, it will capture so much more rain for you than just a small 5 gallon bucket. Just extending that width out, that can grab more rain, let it flow into the middle. Anyway, that's something fun you can do if you're actually trying to collect rainwater. Really, I don't have a need to collect rainwater. I got my hose. I got a little small creek in the back, and uh, now there's plenty of ways to collect rainwater. Hopefully, I never have to rely on collecting rainwater. I know that. My wife knows how to do all that stuff.
Generally, barrels are the best, and like if you're looking to store a ton, you just sister the barrels up with like with the transfer hose. So like when that first barrel gets you just set them up next to each other. When that first barrel gets to a certain point, it's got an overflow hose that goes to the next barrel. And I have a smaller garden, so what I do is I only have one 60-gallon barrel on the corner of my house where the garden's at, where I collect from the downspout. Generally, I'll throw a submersible pump in there, and I'll water right out of that with like a hose just coming off of that. But when for a lot of time, I just have excessive amounts of water, so I have an overflow spout that the hose comes out and runs off into my hugelkultur beds. So the water is constantly being funneled into that area, so that when I get into late season, I'm gonna have that stored up, hopefully reserved down there underneath. But at least it's diverting away from my house if I get too much of it, and I'm still collecting rainwater, which is great because I have chlorine and all sorts of bullshit in my hose water, so I try not to use that at all.
From King Dolo. Any 420 deals for the site this year, Mr. Cal?
Yeah, man, we're getting them up there. I just put one up today. The cherry ward child. I have about 20. I have 20 to 30 beans. I don't have many packs at all, but I'm selling. I just post. I have never posted these cherry ward childs on the website. I've never sold them at all, and they're really nice. I actually posted some pictures on my OK Calyx page, and I think they might have got taken down. I haven't looked yet, but I'm afraid that's probably what happened because the story kind of left on my OK Calyx page. But yeah, I'm gonna have some. I'll have genetic. I'll have a couple not new genetics, just genetics that I haven't put up on the page before that I've grown out. That I like. I'm gonna be again. I'm gonna put up the little bundle called a Cradle of Life. There's gonna be IMO3 involved, IMO1 involved, and it's gonna be all packaged up, looking awesome. I'll have that stuff put up there probably this weekend.
This is from the homie Chase. So, best strain you've seen so far from most yield of product.
I I mean, I'm not great on this at all. I get what I get. I like to I like to breed, so it's always there's always a new next thing you're always kind of wanting to do and get to. But if you can get anything that hits Basically, if you get stuff that's over 2%, typically everybody is kind of like, okay, it's not bad. But if you can get those ones that are at 4 and 5%, some people say they had 7% washers and just crazy things like that. But just to give you an idea, give you a perspective of when you go to some guy that's washing your cannabis and he washes a batch of it and he's like, man, it came back just under 2%. That's not good. He's not going to be able to make any money off of that. You can find something better that will give you a lot more medicine. You're hoping that your plants will wash over 2%. If you got a washer, that's at about 4. That's kind of called a 4 or 5 would be called a washer. That's what you're looking for, and that's what a processor, man. They'll start to work with you when you start pulling out strains that are dumping at 4 or 5, maybe 6. They like those. They'll ask for those a lot. But I don't have a specific strain to give you, man.
My my best washes have been one of them was off of a Tropaya cut that from Canna Rich Farms, who's been commenting. I think he's still here. Uh, from Rich at Canna Rich Farms, he gave me a cut of this Tropaya a couple years ago. And I had that with a GMO cut. And it's the GMO cut here in Michigan. It's a purple GMO, but both of those washed over 7% in the living indoor beds, which is just insane. Makes you think that you made a calculation wrong. But
You're not
the
gonna find a lot of those, y'all. I mean, that's amazing. That is
no,
awesome.
and my buddy who's does hash more than who's like does it for a living and is a washer and all that fun stuff. He couldn't believe the Tropaya did that well because there are certain strains and I'm not the Tropaya, the what did I say? I said Tropaya, but it was actually it wasn't Tropaya. Tangy. Sorry. Yeah, he helped me. Tangy. Same T. It was a Tangy. And yeah, that Tangy and the GMO, both of those were good. And then also Archive always does well. I had great success on their Dark Rainbows and the Dark Rainbow 2.0s. Um, and the reason I kept saying Tropaya is I also ran some Tropaya last year, and those all did very well. Huge plants, monster yields as far as flower goes. I had two Tropaya plants outdoors. Both of them were pushing 12, 13 feet tall that I was constantly tying back down to 6 feet. So branching out like crazy, pulling them back. I'd go out of town for a week. They'd be 8, 9 feet tall, pulling them back. Um, so those plants each put off 10,000 grams about wet weight, which is I can't remember exactly what that translates to dry weight. I think it's 40%, maybe 20%. Can't remember again, but huge dumpers. So um, those those proven genetics really do dump, man. A lot of those run out ones are really good. Canada Rich said it's Crockett's Tangy. It was the strain, but it's a clone only. So
Yeah, I think if you're newer to this, I've talked about it before. There's Nerds Genetics. That anytime I've ever given that, including my co-host on Wednesdays, I don't know if you guys have ever grown his stuff, but Nerds Genetics is by far the sleeper for most people outside of Colorado. And just to be fair, most of the genetics that are crushing it in the underground game are coming from Robbie of Nerds Genetics. And if you've ever seen us interview him, we also love to interview a guy named MJ, Brothers Grow Too. He's dialed into that world as well, and he could tell you firsthand that those genetics bring the people back, not only for flower, but also for washing. And so that's where I think sometimes with this stuff, when you're talking strain or strand, uh, the reality is maybe you should talk more, if you will, like a brand. So what brand of breeder is out there doing it consistently, where it's a variety of different genetics, because that Crockett might not yield 7% in your environment. You might be so new to this, or you might be so old to this that you're stuck in your ways, where you're just not going to get that 7%. So that's where I found more people find success, myself included. When I was trying to run bog, but we weren't growing for concentrates, to be fair. But bog's genetics in the early days were fantastic for flower, and so we were growing a bunch of his genetics. We found this blue moon rocks. It had a nice like blue purple tint to it, and then the people that the higher end customers, they love to pay extra for that. We put in a big fancy glass and put this uh, sh- uh, man, what's that stuff they used to wrap? I can't think of the name. I got stoned, boys. But we would make the glass all fancy and stuff, and people were willing to pay paper mache. You wrap it in paper mache with their favorite sports team, or they like Audi or whatever, whatever the thing was, man. I'd wrap that shit for them, put that stuff in there, and then charge 250. And there was a reason why people would come back to me for that kind of stuff. And this all comes back to the early days of understanding your customer. And so if you're just talking about the best strain for you, you gotta, in my opinion, you gotta start with brand and then start to break it down. Otherwise, you'll be disappointed because everybody's gonna hype up whatever they like, and for the most part, it's never gonna live up to those expectations.
No, that's an excellent point, Brian. That's very well said. That's a way better way to ask it, because if you were going to ask me, like if you're like, uh, you got some roadkill skunk, Kevin, or something like that, I don't have that stuff. I don't have anything like that. I like fruity, terpy, tropical, lilac-y. I like that spectrum of the terps that are out there. Don't get me wrong. I love gas. I love cheese. I love fuel. I love it all. When I hit it, I'm gonna be like, "Oh, that's so good." Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. That terp is always a good terp if you like cannabis. The ones like I'm gonna spend my time on, I'm gonna spend my energy on. Those are gonna be the ones that I want to taste and be like, "Ooh, that was so good. That just hit it." And those are gonna be these tropical fruity kinds. So, me as a breeder, you're gonna, blueberries and cherries. I started off with the foundation of these mandarin cookies, all these yummy, just good. I got DJ Short stuff in there, all kinds of stuff that I thought was tasty and yummy and smelled good. I got a great gushers that me and Kid Mac have been growing for years now, and it's so good. We're still breeding with it. I just pulled seeds from it today. But it smells just like hard candy grapes. Once it gets to about week 3 of flower, you start smelling it and never leaves. It's one of those that stays on the flower after it dries. Even drying it yourself, in my own conditions, which are not the best, you still get that good terp smell. So yeah, good point. Mine are fruity, so that's a good way to put it. And you know what? Often, what people don't know about is like with fruity stuff, you'll get a better fruity taste if it actually has a little bit of gas with it. A just pure fruity taste will have an ending that just fades off and there's nothing left, but it has a high sweet factor at the beginning, which is very flavorful. But it's like that burst of yummy, and then poof, it's gone. And so that's kind of the flavors that I like. But there are a lot of strains that I have that I do know have some gas or some kush in it that brings out just a different profile of that fruity, and then a little bit of something else that kind of kicked it in and made it last a little longer. But the fruity ones that I have, not all of them are big washers at all. But the terps are just outrageous. They're phenomenal. And I love them. And people that grow them are like, man, it's the terpiest plant I've ever grown. Because, yeah, they are. They're fruity, and I've meant to do that. And that's what I've gone for.
Two men and a paddles. Ted out of Michigan here said Z Truffles was the best he washed last year, 6.2%. Another example. So yeah. Rick Easley, low humidity is my issue. Would misters on a timer be a good idea for hot, dry days?
You know, uh, man, messing with your plant sometimes on hot, dry days, you can mess it up a little bit. Like, I don't know, like I understand hot and dry days. The best thing to do is just get them watered at night. Water 'em when the sun starts to go down. Let them have a long drink that the water is not evaporating during the hot days. They can drink all night long. The water will be there in the morning. And then, man, I just let it deal with it, because sometimes spraying more moisture on a plant kind of can burn it some, or just it doesn't react well often. What I see when it's hot, I typically don't spray anything at all. I just keep them watered at night, and that's the best thing I can do. And basically, I'm like, man, if you can't survive the Oklahoma heat, then the genetics is not going to work for me. Then if they do survive, then yay, that's a good thing. So misters, I think it would be a lot of time and energy and money probably that ain't going to get the result that you really want. Just give it a good watering at night.
Well
Agreed.
said. If money is no object and you do want to invest in something, then I would invest in an atomizer that really shrinks down the water molecule, and then add some yucca extract to everything that you're doing. And I think that'll go a lot further without you having to spend a ton of money. Last question, Dank Stranger, can you foliar spray with JLFs?
Mark, you ever foliar sprayed with JLF?
No, I have not personally.
All right. Yeah, you can. I was just gonna see how you did yours. Yes, you can foliar with JLF. I did it 2 years ago. I had testers come up. We were volunteers. I mean, volunteers are plants that came up from last year's seed crops, right? Or from a random seed that fell out of your bud while you're doing whatever in your garden, something like that. But it's a plant that came up that you didn't intend to plant, and you probably don't really know what it is. You have a guess of what it is because you know the plant that was there the year before. But when a volunteer comes up, man, this is the best plant to test on. Test these things out that are being asked because it's a plant that you didn't intend to grow anyway. I've got a bunch of them growing in my yard right now that I've done all kinds of fun tests on. But 2 years ago, I tested pouring 2 month through 1 year old JLF on established plants, and I mean just straight JLF. When I got to about a month 6 or 7, I could see the plant starting to get a little burned, a little irritated, and the ends of the leaves would cook a little bit. And it's like, oh, okay, so this stuff is it was proof that it was really getting some kind of nutrient in there because the plant wasn't liking it on it, just straight. But a 5 month and younger JLF, I dumped it straight on the plant and it loved it. It thrived. It was just yummy, just eating it up. So you can foliar pretty heavy with the JLF. You just got to get the chunks out because it has way more chunky material that's been breaking down for much longer than the JMS that's been going for 3 days. And so you do have to kind of get the bits and pieces out. I mean, I don't just go straining it. I just give it a good eyeball of hitting a good liquidy pocket and going there. And when I'm about a half inch from the bottom, dumping it out and getting some more because I don't want to suck up a bunch of junk in there. But my recommendation for you is if you take a basic 32-ounce bottle, which is a basic handheld spray bottle, I would put about an ounce of JLF in there. Give it a good shake. Spray it on established plants. And if you have those testers that grow outside, again, it's the best time to do it. If you don't, then spray it on just a small part of your plant. Don't just go smoking all of them, hoping that it works. Try these things out because my testing that I've done throughout the years, yeah, I've tested so much that I've burned up plants and I've burned up big, gorgeous 8 foot plants and veg that were so healthy and pretty. I put too much composting material around it during too hot of the summer area during like June, put too much compost, too much JLF, too much hay, and the microbes just cooked and cooked and cooked at that root level, and it burned my plants up. And that was about 2 summers ago. I lost some big, pretty plants. So you can mess your plants up even doing Jadam because you just did way too much. But usually when you use just a little bit, very beneficial. JLF is just pure nutrients, y'all.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably why I haven't done it, Kevin, is because of the fact that the JLF is going to be chunky, and just it's more work to go through that I'm not used to doing, rather than just applying it, just dumping it on the ground more or less. So that's why I guess I would use like an FPE, and that's like generally what I have foliared with in the past because it's a little more refined, I guess, in the process. There's not going to be the chunks in the mix when you're done with it. So I guess, yeah, FPs is what I would foliar with, but JLFs work as well, as Kevin said. So don't compartmentalize yourself. Don't build yourself into a silo on that one. There
Yeah,
was
and
a, sorry, go ahead.
A good FPE is very valuable. Mark's guys definitely want to stress that because FPEs are super easy to make also because you're going to have lots of leafy green vegetable material from your garden left over. I always use my sunflower stalks and seeds and heads and all that stuff to make FPEs, and I always use my cannabis defoliation to make an FPE. Man, so like right now I've got probably three 5-gallon buckets of each sunflower fermented plant extract and cannabis defoliation fermented plant extract, and that's all just recycle and closing the loop, constantly reusing it over and over and again. And that FPE has a little bit of lab, a little bit of molasses, water, and plant material. And you let that set for about 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on temperature. Strain all the liquid out, and it's loaded with microbes and nutrients. And it's a great thing to foliar with. And when my plants are established, I can feed my FPE directly to it. I don't have to water it down. I can just feed it straight to it, and everything is good to go. They love it.
There was a one question from Fire Ferments over on Instagram that I didn't get to list, and it's what can I do about roly-polies crawling up my plants and beds, thinking more mulch? And that's a tough one, man.
Say it
Especially
again,
just
would you please?
he said, what can I do about roly-polies? Sorry, common gray isopods, the common gray kind of the shitty isopods that you see out in your garden outside. They're great outside. There's no and there it's so funny. I posted something about this a year ago or so, and it was a point of contention for a lot of people. Um, but they make no mistake, they can become a nuisance in a long-term no-till bed indoors. Um, when you start to when there starts to become a competition over food, right? Like there's only so much going on in that closed loop. There's only so much defoliation that you can provide that's coming off of those plants for the mic everything to eat. And you want that stuff to stay there for a period of time because you're using it as your mulch layer at a certain point in the life of this bed. But when you have an overpopulation of these common gray isopods, they they will not only will they not stop reproducing, so they grow in populations past what the space can afford them, but they'll just eat up everything faster than everything else can eat up, and they'll outcompete things. So you'll start to lose biodiversity by way of roly poly because there's just not enough food there for they'll just peace out. Um, so the things that you can do for your roly polies going up your plants right now, yeah, you can mulch it right now. You can give it a lot, feed it more, give the whole system some more food to get you through this cycle. But it's time probably now to think about something a little bit more drastic. And I did write a whole blog on this, just on ideas that I've gathered, things that I've tried. It's on mibeneficials.com under the guide section. You can check that out for like a more in-depth answer to this. But um, one of the things that you can do is hog out that top 3-inch layer of good humic because that's where they're mostly going to be. You can go at them right now with the shop vac if you think that that's going to do much, but it sounds like things have kind of gotten out of control at this point. Um, you can get chickens, you can get lizards. I mean, we've talked about a lot of these creative ideas that will actually work, but when you're in an indoor, those aren't always a possibility. So yeah, that's a tough one, man. But I would definitely check out that blog post. And if you want to shoot us a DM or something, I can try to give you some more ideas. But what do you guys got to add to that? Anything?
Sticky
Um,
paper. That's what I put
Yes,
down before.
around
But
the stems.
Brian,
well, yeah, I mean the grays are a nuisance. There's no value for them even in my world. We've talked about this so many times. You can put Vaseline around like your stalk. It's pretty hard for them to get over that kind of stuff. The sticky trap stuff works a little bit better. So if you don't mind spending a couple dollars, it's a little bit better than the Vaseline actually works. Um, and in my opinion, I mean, I have a bearded dragon right here. That little man probably eats between 50 to 100 isopods a day. So if you have a bearded dragon, you have the money. I mean, you can go to a reptile if you don't mind just getting kind of a basic color for like $50, maybe less. especially on a Sunday at the end of the show. That's when people do deals, learn these things and you can save money for yourself. But one little bearded dragon would more than likely start to eat at least 50 of those a day. And when that starts to add up, that's going to produce those little isopods, especially if you're adding the bearded dragon and then you're going out of your way to find them and physically remove them. And sometimes that's what it takes, man, is you got to just do a little extra work on that kind of stuff. There's also a woodlouse spider that I've been talking to people. I'm trying to understand more about it. So I don't want to talk too, I don't know enough about it to speak on it like I've used it or anything. But supposedly, that will also eradicate a lot of the issues with that. And so potentially a bearded dragon with a woodlouse spider might be that golden ticket that will get rid of the nuisance that is known as the gray isopod. All right, I believe Kevin is giving away stuff, so that's
All
better
right,
than
y'all.
what Mark and I are doing.
Heck yeah, it is. All right, boys and girls that are listening, I have wrote down the top 2 questions that I like. The first person, Randall Flagg, is making Jadam sulfur worth it? No, it is not. You need to DM me on Instagram. You need to go to Instagram, at OKCalix. DM me, say that you won one of the questions on our biodiversity show. I'm gonna send you cherry on a grande across the chest of the cheetah. Cherryana Grande is very cherry crossed to Chimera too. She is super terpy. This cut right here, we call it the Kid Mac cut. He hunted this out about 2 years ago. It's the terpiest plant that I have grown, and I believe he's ever grown. We have grown it for 2 years now, and we had just shut it down. It's only now in these bred seeds, and I'm going to pop a new round of Cherry on Grande this summer outside, and we're going to see if we can't find another one that's going to be good and start to breed with it and see what we can do. But Chester the Cheetah, that's one of the leaf strains. It was a big girl. She had big buds. Her fade went into a pretty brownish purple, but she was big. The buds were big. One thing about belief genetics that people say is the buds don't get real big. They're real frosty, not terpy, but frosty. This girl was big. And DM me. The next guy, Mark Nelson. Hashwater Labs. He said, what can he do with his wash water from his cannabis? And I said, make Hashwater Labs and then make FPE with the cannabis flower. Good question. That led to a lot of good ideas that maybe somebody caught on to and can start to try that. Mark Nelson, you need to DM me at OKCalix on Instagram. I'm going to give you the blueberry truffle across the chest of the cheetah. Blueberry truffle is Truffle Queen crossed to my Bluetooth. And this Truffle Queen we have grown outside now for 2 summers. And this is one of those plants that just doesn't get bud rot. The bugs don't mess with it much. It's durable. It grows so well. Then we as in me, Kid Mac, Fat Beard, Pothead, we have bred this plant over and over and over just because how it's proven itself outside here in Oklahoma. So these films I just pulled off, and I have not tested them. These are brand new. These are just giveaways to you all. Run them, test them, take pictures of them, show them to me. If you do whatever you want to, trade them, whatever you want. Enjoy life with them. They're yours. But DM me, guys. Thanks for the questions. That was good.
All right. I love that idea too. So maybe we'll keep that going for giveaway next week. I'll come up with something as part of a giveaway and sponsor next week's best question contest. I love that idea. Um, so we like to kind of keep this thing as close to an hour. We went over today just because we had so many awesome questions, guys. Seriously, not something that you'll hear any one of us complain about sitting here a little bit longer to go a little deeper into these things with you guys. It's a little more arduous when we're just kind of sitting here talking about our own stuff because it gets a little preachy, and that's not the intent of what we're trying to do here. We want to connect with you guys. We want your questions. If we don't know it, we'll tell you we don't know it, and hopefully we can go learn and get better with it. We appreciate everybody for throwing in the questions. We don't make money off. We don't have sponsorships on this show. We don't make money. we're doing this because we really enjoy doing this. We also don't get to talk on a weekly basis, so this is a great opportunity for us to just connect as well. So with that, Kev, what do you got going on? What are your shout outs, and where can we find you?
All right, so you can check me out at okcalyx.com, okcalyxshop.com. Hope you guys are hearing all this, man. My internet is terrible. okcalyxshop.com, you're going to find all kinds of inputs. You're going to find some bundles that are there. A few of them have sold out. There's an input hoarder bundle that has tons of inputs, y'all, and it's $140. I usually have it at 200, but you're going to get a pint of OHN, a pint of EM5, a pint of Labs, a pint of sunflower fermented plant extract, a pint of IMO integrated IMO2, and the list goes on. There's like 9 or 10 inputs in there, and it's one heck of a deal. And I've got blazed cherries up there. It's for sale for the 420 sale. I'm gonna have some new IMO3 bundles going up. I'll have a new genetics bundle that's gonna go up. It'll have a whole bunch of seeds for very little price, and I usually make about 10 of those and just sell until supplies are out. But you find me on OKCalyx or at OKCalyx at OKCalyx Genetics. I got a YouTube also that I just post a lot of raw video to. On Saturdays, I typically will do, everything is closed up again, but I typically do some free Zoom classes. We talk all kinds of subjects about natural farming. I answer questions. I have ideas to give people. I also do some consultation one-on-one. You just DM me and ask. What about you, Brian?
Yeah, again, like what Mark was saying, we do this because there is also, in our opinion, there's something to just being genuine, giving back for whatever reason that seems to follow, and it just continues in my life as well. Having rubber ducky isopods now, I'm now 2 months co-owner of Terrarium Tribe, so Shop Terrarium Tribe and rubberduckyisopods.com. That's how you support me. I will have my son hopefully born this weekend is what we're thinking. So hopefully that will happen. And you guys will hear more from me because I won't be behind the scenes, not sleeping and trying to take care of my family. So this has always been something that I've enjoyed doing, boys, especially in the early days when we were just doing it on Instagram. And now that we're recording it and people could see what Kevin has given off his off his head. None of this is written down or anything. This is the majority of this stuff is literally off the top of our heads. And I hope that you guys, since it is recorded, that you go back and see what Kevin is offering you, what Mark is offering you, and what I'm offering.
Yeah, and this week, I don't know that I'm actually going to be running any 420 sales this week. I'm going to be celebrating and busy and just doing all sorts of crazy stuff. So, but I do have some awesome springtails coming up. Some semi-arid and arid springtails that are coming down the pipeline. That I haven't announced on the site or put up or anything like that, but they're coming probably in the next few weeks. Some woolly mammoths, which are really cool looking, furry, big, kind of slow moving, docile springtails. I also have some Byless ants, which are really heavy cleanup crew. So they move fast, they stay on top, and they do work on cleanup alongside the rest of the crew. So another super cool addition to the Bioactive. And then we have our offering of just cool exotic rainbow springtails up on mibeneficials.com. Biodiversity packs always available at mibeneficials.com, and shoot us a DM if you guys run into any issues. We're happy to help. We also carry other predatory beneficials. So if you ever need help with any array of pest issues, don't hesitate to shoot us a DM at mibeneficials on Instagram. And until next week, guys, we really appreciate all the participation and look forward to talking next week. See ya.
See you guys. Appreciate y'all.